So we're really pleased to be here. To begin, I'll start with a little bit of history, just a moment, where I can tell you that since 1942, March 27th, 1942, at the beginning of the Detroit Jewish News in Detroit, yeah, I guess that makes sense, we have printed thousands of recipes and hundreds and thousands of stories about food. So all of this extensive research has drawn us to the conclusion that Jews like to eat. Is there anyone who would disagree with me on that? And more to the point, I think, is the fact that if you go to a Jewish household, they want you to eat. And so this is sort of the idea that we were thinking about, especially, again, after managing the digital archive for the Detroit Jewish News and seeing all the stories and seeing all the recipes, we decided we needed a cookbook, something the Jewish News had not done. And so we decided we should produce a cookbook. And I can tell you that the entire editorial staff, the executive director, Marnie Rayet, the managing editor, Jackie Hedepol, other editors, David Sachs, Carrie Guten Cohen, I got it right, didn't I? And our digital manager, Elizabeth King, everybody was all in, including a volunteer, Chayla Bluth Rosenberg, who you may know. But to put a book together like this, you really need a quarterback. You need one person, an editor, who takes the mass of information and works with the designer and works with all of us to put this book together. And that is Ashlee Watkins, who you'll hear from here shortly. I think she did a magnificent job. Yeah, absolutely. But this book would be nothing without the contributions of the Detroit Jewish community. And it's the one thing we really wanted in this book above all were the stories. The recipes are great. None of us at the Jewish News are above eating tasty dishes. But it's the stories of these dishes that mattered to us. And in the end, that's the contribution from how many of you here, maybe? Raise your hands if you contributed. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. And so we think we've come up with something quite special. And I will now elaborate further on the book. I'd like to introduce Ashlee. She's the operations manager for the Detroit Jewish News. That sounds kind of mundane. Let me just say, Ashlee does everything. Just about everything but writing every story in the publication. She has a degree in anthropology from the University of Michigan Dearborn. She's been with the Jewish News for 7 years and has also served the City of Livonia Parks and Recreation Department for more than 15 years and serves on the board of the City of Wayne Historical Society. She also tells me she learned to cook from her mother, Tanya, and her grandmother, Carlin, and realized early on, I really like this, the difference that a good meal can make and how memories are made around the table. I think that's the essence of the book. And then Dr. Joelle Abramowitz writes about food for the Detroit Jewish News. All right, you got a big fan club here. Jeez, God, you got more applause than me. Excellent. And in her Substack, she writes for her Substack, and say this 3 times fast, gastronomist, economist. She has previously written for a number of other outlets, including Jewish, Jew-ish.com, and The Forward. Originally from New Jersey, after living in Ann Arbor for the last 9 years, Joelle now considers herself a Michigander, and I like that. Michigander. Some people like Michiganian. I'm on the Michigander side myself. Whatever. And when she's not in the kitchen or writing about it, she has a day job. She's a member of the research faculty at the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, studying health and labor economics. I will also say in this week's issue of the Jewish News, You'll find her recipes for Passover desserts, which all look pretty tasty. And she also has a recipe in a taste of tradition. So, the first thing I'll start with, Ashlee, what was the original vision for A Taste of Tradition?
Well, originally we knew that we wanted to bring in new recipes, but we also knew that we wanted to show some of the recipes that we already had in the archive. And like Mike said, we wanted to showcase some of the stories that went along with these recipes, because obviously there were special people, special places, special days that kind of deserved their special time to shine and their moment to be celebrated too. So they were going to be just like a spiral-bound book, but after we started getting so many submissions, it kind of grew into something much larger. We started getting, these amazing photos. We started getting really great stories. And then eventually it just turned into this great hardcover book and became bigger and bigger and better and better. And it's all thanks to everybody that was submitting everything to us and their participation in the project.
You make it sound so simple. Just got bigger and better. There's a lot of work behind that. So how did you gather the recipes?
We put a call out in the newspaper and in our newsletter and on our website. So once that went out, we started to get them pretty much from everywhere. They were getting mailed in, slid under my door. I was taking them via text message. Pretty much land, air, and sea. They were coming in every medium possible. So we even set up a day in the office so people could come in and submit their photos and recipes if that was a barrier for them, if they weren't able to type, or if they needed help submitting pictures digitally, just to kind of make it accessible for everyone so that everybody would be welcome and able to participate.
Mm-hmm. So how about the challenges of preparing the recipes? Because as Ashlee mentioned, not only did they come up under the door, they came in all forms, handwritten, typed, scriptic notes.
I think the most unexpected challenge was kind of formatting and retyping all of the shorthand for like cups, teaspoons, tablespoons. That's something that you don't really think about, but everybody's shorthand is a little bit different. And when you're going through so many of them, that kind of gets to be time consuming. And then like Mike said, some of them were handwritten, so you go through and you type all of those out too. But as far as challenges, there weren't too many. One of the other difficult things too is if I was getting multiple submissions from someone, it was hard for me to choose which one would make it into print because they were both just so good. So we would kind of have a minute where we wouldn't be able to decide, but it ended up working out in the end because then I had some that were savory, some that were sweet, and then I could balance it out at the end to make sure that it was pretty equal at the end of the publication being finished up.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we decided to do was just 2 categories. Instead of trying appetizers, mains, just 2 categories, savory and sweet. And that became quite apparent as we got into it. So how did you decide to organize it? Because as Ashlee mentioned, we were thinking spiral brown paper. How many of those have you seen at synagogues or churches? And it grew into something a bit more polished. Yeah. And also there were, of course, budgetary restrictions too on how big you can make the book and costs for it. So.
Well, we did get some samples from the printer, and those kind of helped us see what was possible. But then as far as just kind of organizing them, there were lots of spreadsheets involved, lots of categorizing, kind of what everything would kind of fall into. And they really got broken down into micro categories. And then like Mike said, we just kind of decided it was a lot simpler just to go salty and sweet, or savory and sweet. And then from there, I think you'll realize in the table of contents, it is kind of in their micro category order, with the exception of some that just got moved around in post-production for like purely aesthetic reasons. Like if the photos just didn't align the right way on the pages side by side, then they would get moved around.
So tell me about selecting the images and working with the designer on this, because it really evolved, again, from paper to a glossy.
Yeah, so when we were talking about doing it in a spiral bound, we were thinking it was going to be in black and white, so we weren't really thinking about artwork that we were going to have to supply. But then when we decided that we were going to be doing like a hardcover book, that was kind of one of the first things that I started with, was finding a stock artist that had all of these pieces of recipes, you know, the little spice picture, the little fruits and vegetable pictures, somebody that had a complete catalog that would kind of be able to go across the whole book so it would have a cohesive look, because nothing's worse than working on a project with a designer or with your production team, getting almost all the way to the end and then realizing that you still need one little photo or one little piece of artwork and it's nowhere to be found or it doesn't even exist. So I kind of started at the beginning with that, and then once we found someone, we just went with that one.
And we have an excellent design firm, Farrago.
Yes.
And so it was Ashlee who worked directly with the designer to come up with this final design. I mean, a lot of us, of course, had input on it, but it really, I thought you came up with a fine design at the end.
Yeah, I will say too that Katie helped me with the recipe card and handwritten pages too, because it kind of felt like you were losing a piece of it by retyping it and having it put on a page, and there just wasn't space for those to be you know, scanned, put on each individual page to where you'd still be able to read them. And I still wanted to include them somehow. So Katie helped me do the collage and use them for the front protective pages in the book. And I thought that that turned out really nice.
So what was your favorite part of the process?
Definitely working with the people. You know, it was kind of a little bit of everything that I've learned working for the Jewish News over the years. Everything from like the sales to the production, to the little bit of editorial that I've learned, and I'm still learning. But definitely kind of like breaking that fourth wall and letting the audience kind of take over and tell their stories and give us their information and their views, their photos, and putting that all into this book that they can keep and share and have forever.
Great, thank you. So, there are a lot of cookbooks in the world. Before I move on, I'm going to say my impression of Ashlee's work is this. You have a desk, and think of something akin to maybe the main control center for NASA. And here's Ashlee with her desk, and she's handling the spreadsheet. She's handling communication with everyone. She's handling the uplinks, the downlinks. And so her desk was sort of cookbook central during this. Anyway, so there are a lot of cookbooks in the world. What do you think this fits in, Joelle?
Yeah, so A Taste of Tradition fits into this much larger tradition of community cookbooks, which started after the Civil War in the United States, and is a way for many communities, and especially I would say the Jewish community, both to showcase the community's recipes, but also as a fundraiser for the community. And what I think really, is special about community cookbooks in general, this cookbook in particular, is that when you go to buy a cookbook off the shelf, right, it might be some fancy restaurant's best recipes or some food influencers' recipes, but you don't know if anyone actually makes those recipes, right? They might just be, this is what's on trend right now, or this is some aspirational recipe that you're never going to make all the steps of. But in this cookbook, we know that these are really beloved recipes from this community, And that's what we get to enjoy in this cookbook.
You say Community Cookbook started after the Civil War. I did not know that. There were none before that, or tell me a little bit about this trend.
Yeah, so my understanding is that there were paper shortages during the war, and then afterward, some communities started to see this as an opportunity. And then and that was successful, and so more started to do it. And they're actually very valuable historically, especially because it was an opportunity in particular for women, right, who might not have been published, in other venues, to share their recipes, potentially their stories as well. And we still have those, and we can learn a lot about those communities. So when we think about this cookbook, it's certainly valuable. Now we can all enjoy it, but it's also valuable, for the future when people look back at these times and think about what was life like, in Metro Detroit in the 2020s, and what were people cooking.
Oh, excellent. And that is one thing about this cookbook. You may have noticed the ISBN number on the back. So the book's registered with the Library of Congress. So there is a legacy here that Joelle mentions. Now this may not be fair, but just in case, do you happen to know when the first Jewish Community Cookbook?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think like end of the 1800s.
Yeah. So what features about Taste of Tradition stood out to you?
So certainly, when we look through, we see there are some like very particular recipes. There are also some like genre of recipes where we have, several different recipes for the same kind of dish. But I think what's really cool about that is that we can see sometimes regional differences in the way people's families prepared foods. There's one recipe for gefilte fish where it talks about the Polish tradition is that you would make it a little sweeter, but they don't like to make it sweeter, right? So we see that in there, but also just potentially preferences for how to make things. So like with gefilte fish, there are some that are poached, some of the recipes, one recipe where it's baked. We also see several recipes for challah, but one recipe is for like more of a, what I'll call a standard traditional recipe. One uses a bread machine, so we're seeing, some new technologies maybe since the shtetl, right? And then we're also seeing a gluten-free challah recipe. So, really getting some, diversity, right, in even for the same kinds of recipes, how people are making those recipes and potentially making them their own.
Yeah, that's an interesting trend I've seen in the Detroit Jewish News as well. Among the recipes, when you start hitting the 90s, you'll see Passover, recipes that have changed. The Passover recipes for the modern era, dietary Passover recipes, which don't sound too keen to me, but anyway, it's interesting because as you look through probably the last 40 years in the Jewish News, you see exactly what you're talking about, how recipes not only evolve from Bubby who came from Czechoslovakia in 1910, but they evolved just literally what we've been making in the last 20 or 30 years. So do you have any favorite recipes in the book?
Yeah, so I've already made one
Besides
recipe.
Your own?
I've already made one recipe from the book. I was Grandma Ida's mun cookies, or poppy seed cookies. I'm a big poppy seed lover, but I'd never had poppy seed cookies before, which I later learned have been like a Kiddush staple. It's just not at any Kiddushes that I've been to. And so I was eager to make them, and I did. And they were delicious. They were just as Lori Bounds described, that they were not too sweet and definitely a hit. So that was great. And then I make a lot of challah, but I have some gluten-free friends. And so it just seems like, the holy grail will be to make a good gluten-free challah. So I'm eager to try the gluten-free challah recipe in the cookbook as well.
Excellent. How about, do any of the recipes relate to your personal food heritage?
Yeah, so looking through the cookbook, there's so many recipes of foods that I ate growing up or that I've cooked. So there's cabbage soup and stuffed cabbage, challah, matzo ball soup, mandelbrot, so many different recipes. I do have a recipe in the cookbook. It's for charoset, which is timely with Passover coming up this week. And so that was a recipe that I developed based on my experience going to a more Sephardic style Seder. So it has some more Ashkenazi elements like apples, but instead of walnuts, it has pistachios, it has dried apricots and other dried fruits. So I encourage you to check that out in the cookbook.
No. I'll ask Ashlee the same thing. Any of the recipes you're going to try?
I've already tried a few of them. So I think so far my favorite one is the carrot souffle, just because it's a little bit different and it's kind of something that's like a little bit
We have
unexpected.
a winner.
And it also kind of reminds me of something that my great grandma used to make, but it's she calls it corn pudding, but it's kind of like a sweet corn souffle, and it just was very nostalgic for me. So yeah.
Excellent. Anything? Okay, we are thinking. I'll mention this right now. Now, no dates, no set plans, but we're thinking about a second volume. Maybe holiday recipes, maybe a second volume for people who did not get their recipe into the first volume. So just having mentioned that, keep your eyes on the Jewish News, read your Jewish News for further information. Having said that, is there anything you'd like to see in volume 2? Ashlee, I'll ask both of you that.
Not anything in particular, but I just am looking forward to seeing more family photos. Like that part to me is just very interesting, very cool to see that people still have those. Everything's not digital yet. So I like seeing people looking for those pictures, bringing them out, sharing them with us, and getting them out there.
Yeah, I think it was interesting to me to see so many Ashkenazi recipes and some recipes that were non-Ashkenazi from different Jewish traditions around the world. Certainly the majority of the Detroit Jewish community is Ashkenazi, but I think it could be really cool to highlight more of those, that diversity in the Detroit Jewish community. And I really loved in the cookbook seeing the stories, right? And different people frame that differently, right? Sometimes it was about the family member who had the recipe. Sometimes it's about the recipe itself. So really, showcasing that in the next cookbook too, I think is something to look forward to.
I always thought in reading it that if you didn't even see the recipe, just the stories and the photos were wonderful about the recipe. Mm-hmm. It's interesting too. Yeah, there was some diversity. I mean, there was the one I'm thinking of where it had Japanese, some Japanese influence in it. I'm sorry, I can't remember the particular recipe, but I think that's a good idea. We'll have to keep that in mind for another one. Anything you'd like to add, Ashlee?
Just that I will be signing some of the cookbooks afterwards, but if you do have a recipe, I'd like you guys to sign mine too.
Okay. Oh, great. All right. Good response there. Joelle?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. And I will say, too, that another thing about Joelle's work is that because it's in the Jewish News, everything goes into the digital archive. And that's the William Davison Digital Archive of Jewish Detroit History, which is now 350,000 some pages. Every page of the Detroit Jewish News from 1942, every page of the Chronicle, its predecessor, from 1916 to 1951. It's preserved at U of M. U of M is hosting it on their servers. So that is as good as it gets for digital preservation. Someone would have to nuke Ann Arbor and offsite storage for us to lose that. Plus, there's a full copy of of this archive at the National Library of Israel. And in that respect, everything you have written for the Jewish News is now preserved forever, and we really appreciate your contributions there. I'm going to open it up for questions now. Got to have some, please. Oh,
Be careful not to get close to the speaker.
yeah. Where's the speaker? It's back there. Yeah.
I take it from what you've told us that you didn't make all the recipes in the book. Do you have any quality control methods to make sure that somebody hasn't given you some kind of a recipe that they made up and they never made? Or worse, a recipe that actually turns out to be explosive?
Well, since they came with the story, we were kind of just, we were hoping that they would just give us the tried and true ones. We are a small but mighty team at the JN, and we don't really have the bandwidth to test all of them. But like I said, since they were coming with the story, we were asking for ones that were special. We were just expecting ones that were coming in that really were used time and time again, and that really meant something to the family.
I will add, too, that we were keeping an eye open, and discussed this, and keeping an eye open for recipes that might have come off the Campbell's soup can, and someone's trying to pass it off as original, but we really didn't have any issues like that. And so unless one of you out here has sent us a false recipe, we wouldn't know the difference anyway.
Mike, I've got the mic.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carrie Guten-Cohen.
By the way, she would not give up her apple cake recipe for the book. I just want to point that out.
But was a major help in getting the cookbook
Absolutely.
together.
Thank you. I did bring the recipe I made it's on page 48. I brought some of my brownies, and I see someone else made some mandel bread too. So help
Nancy
yourselves.
Sterling.
To talk about the quality control part, I did edit every one of the stories, the recipes. I do cook, and I usually fine-tune edit all the recipes lately in the Jewish News. Joelle, you are a pleasure to edit. So thank you. But Jeff? Mike, sorry. Okay, so...
Yeah, this is Mike Smith, by the way.
Oh, another one. But the quality question is good. There were a couple recipes that I made calls on because I thought, this doesn't make sense to me. Or there was something that was the measurement was off or something. So I guess I was somewhat of the quality control. So good luck. Hopefully everybody was really good with giving us everything. But there were a few things that I noticed, and we fixed them. And people were really eager to have it right. So that was good. Thanks.
Hi, I'm David Sachs with Carrie Cohen. We're contributing editors at the Jewish News. And Passover is coming up this Wednesday night. We have a 5-pound box of matzah, and after the Seder, we'll be stuck with 4 pounds of it. And if you look on, right in the beginning of the book, page 3 or whatever, we have my wife, Frida Arlo's recipe for Detroit-style matzah pizza. And it's really good, and you can, even if you have matzah after Passover, it's good, low-calorie, healthy thing to eat. Yeah.
I assume you'll be bringing a few to the office on Monday? Yeah, following Monday.
This is more a point of information if you're interested. You may be familiar with the fact that the organizations present book stock. And it's coming up. It begins, I think, mid-April. I don't have the exact dates. But I worked there for many years. And over the years, I found a lot of really fascinating old Jewish cookbook recipes. I have one at home, I think, from 1918 or something like that. So if you're interested in gathering old Jewish cookbooks, you might try to get there right at the beginning in the cookbook section, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you might find. So that's mid-April towards I think the last day is the 27th, Sunday to Sunday. There.
Now I have a question for the audience. What are we missing in this book? What would you like to see? What recipes would you like to see in it? Please, let's hear it.
No, I was just looking at the picture of the babka at the beginning of your desserts recipe. And that one looked really nice. I didn't see the recipe in here for it, though. So I would say that.
Why, that's a good point. What else? What else would you like to see in it? I guess the book is near perfect.
Maybe more appetizing.
More apple cake? Oh. Yeah.
We tried our hardest for the apple cake.
I'll have to make one for you, Mike.
Yeah, please. Soup. Oh, now that's a good one. Yeah, we did not have soups in there at all. We didn't. There were a couple recipes we didn't use, but there really weren't any soup recipes, were there?
There was sweet and sour cabbage soup.
Oh, yeah, there is the one. And borscht, if you
And
consider
borscht.
that. But there really wasn't a lot of soup submissions. They're matzo ball, I guess, too. What else? Anything else? Well, I guess we have a short but sweet book club session. Or savory, and savory. So we sure do appreciate it. And Ashlee will be signing books here. And again, come up and sign hers, please. You can buy books up at the front. Makes a great present. And I want to tell you, too, that the next book club is lined up. We missed one session in January, which was a terrible day. I'm thinking for the next season, this season actually, we're going to keep it like March to October and as many live sessions as we can. Having said that, the next session will be on June 7th. Same time, same place at 11 o'clock. And the book will be Dual Identities, Living in Meyer's Shadow, by Arthur Horowitz, who happens to be sitting in the back. So we'll look forward to that. You can get your copies at Schuler's. And again, I want to thank you all for coming out, and I want to thank Ashlee not only for editing the book and doing yeoman service for the Jewish News, but for contributing to this session, and Joelle for her contributions. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you very much for coming out. We really appreciate it.